Hello, welcome to Mage Talk. I'm Kalen, and today I'm joined by Damien Retzinger. Damien, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's a good day.
Good day. That's awesome. We had some minor troubleshooting going on there with the video, but we figured it out at the end.
Yeah, took a little bit.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about a bunch of different stuff. PWA, Daffodil, which is your project, your PWA solution essentially framework on Angular.
hmm
And then we'll talk. You had a really insightful comment recently on one of my LinkedIn posts on agency side development versus merchant side development. I wanted to dig into. Love to dig into remote work and some other things as
Yeah.
well. You mentioned getting your first GitHub sponsor. So,
Yeah.
and then you also mentioned you're pretty heavy into gaming, which I'm sure a lot of our audience is also into. I'm almost illiterate when it comes to gaming, but so we'll see if I can hold a conversation. Um,
Sure.
but uh, but yeah, man. So I don't know how are you feeling about the state of Magento right now, as far as maybe specific to PWA, or just kind of in general.
So Magento in general, kind of the feeling that I get from the community right now, especially with the recent 2.4 release, is that some people are a little bit agitated about the requirement for Elasticsearch. They're a little bit agitated about like the deprecation of 7.1 and 7.2, and even though that's or PHP 7.1, PHP 7.2, even though that's just deprecation of PHP naturally,
Hmm.
people in combination with the recent Magento 1 kind of collapse, there's a little bit of feeling in the community that things are, a little bit
No bueno.
broken. Yeah, no bueno. Not
What are your
happy.
thoughts
Not
on
happy.
M1? Because I think about as old as it is and as dead as it is, I still think about it all the time. I'm still fascinated by it, and I want to get everybody's take on it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I started on M1, obviously. I started in 1.6, so I started back in 2014-ish. Um,
I
that's
started
kind
on
of my
1.6. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
What did I get the year right? I think it's
I
2014 around
think
there. There's
so. I think so. I always forget, I don't know when 1.3 came out or 1.4, I'm always, I was a little later in the game than some of the OGs. But
yeah.
yeah. Um but yeah, you're sorry,
The
you're
one the one funny thing that I mean, just completely in relation to you, I can still remember way back in the day looking at Stack Overflow posts from you
nice.
from
Nice.
from back in the day, and I would happen upon an issue that I was facing in M1, and I'd be like, oh, there's Kalen's there's post. I know
Nice,
that guy. I know
nice.
I've heard of that
Yeah,
guy.
I'd have the same thing where Stack Overflow is so magical in so many ways, and I wasn't super active, but I got in there, answered a few questions from time to time, and yeah, when you see the wildest thing is when you Google and find your own answer to a question
Yeah,
that you like
yeah.
completely forgot about that you answered like 3 years ago.
hmm
Yeah, that's
I
always
do that. I do that all the time. I don't really do it so much with GitHub or with Stack Overflow, but I do it all the time with GitHub issues, especially in Angular Core or in various things that I've contributed to over
Do
the
you
years.
contribute to the Angular
Um,
core?
yeah,
Okay, that's awesome.
yeah. I've done. So we can talk about that when we get into Daffodil stuff. But yeah, I do a lot of stuff in the Angular community, and just in terms of like the cross sections that I work with.
Yeah,
It's a lot of different layers.
you're a pretty technical dude. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
if you want to talk about like Kubernetes, I'm
Yeah,
down.
I feel
Let's
I feel
go.
like every time we start talking about technical stuff, I'm like barely hanging on to the conversation, but I'm doing the best I can. I used to be a Magento developer day in and day out, 40, 50 hours a week, breathing it, eating and sleeping it. And I really haven't done actual Magento development for a while. I'm obviously still plugged into the community and stuff like that, but yeah, I can tell you're like
Yeah.
you're deep technically in all the things that you're working in, and anybody that creates their own PWA framework, there's a level of expertise needed there. And I mean, yeah, let's jump into that. So why? Well, I'm assuming that you like Angular because you've worked with it. I'm sure I'm sure there are lots of religious wars of over Angular versus React and everything else. And maybe it's the
Yeah,
same story. It's like it's what you like. There's probably things you feel it does better, whatever. But like, like, what's your pitch? Like, why Angular?
sure. So I'll go into why I picked Angular for the very first time. And the honest truth is that I worked at an agency and they had to build an Angular site for a client, so I learned
That's
Angular, and
always the reason. That's always the reason.
that's it.
Yeah. Simple as that.
Right around that same time, Vue was kind of picking up in the Laravel community, and React was still had the licensing problems that people were worried about from Facebook, so it wasn't as you know omnipotent or omnipresent, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of how I got into Angular. But then when we started Daffodil in 2017 or 18, I can't remember when anymore. Um, it all started to just make sense that we picked Angular over React. So uh, I don't know how much you know about Daffodil, but I'm going to assume you know nothing.
Yeah. Assume that.
Or
I
PWA's.
know we had a
I'm going to
conversation.
assume you know
Yeah,
nothing.
we had a quick conversation about it back in New York. Was that 2 years ago or 3 years ago now?
Yeah, 2018
Yeah.
October. Yeah.
And then I took a quick look at the site. But yeah, assume that I'm a complete idiot, and you'll be very close
All
to the
right.
truth with that assumption.
So one of the maybe the most obvious things with things like PWAs, if you get into it at all, is that you're going to have to make HTTP requests over to some service to retrieve
Right.
information because you've decoupled your front end from your back
Right.
end. Um, and if you look at like Vue Storefront or if you look at
Yep.
PWA Studio,
Yep.
these have a middleware.
Yep.
So for Vue Storefront, it's the Elasticsearch or MongoDB instance or whatever it is. I think it's Elasticsearch that stores kind of like the Vue Storefront version of whatever a product is.
Got it.
Same thing with Venia and PWA Studio. You have Upward, which stores,
Which is
or it doesn't really store, but
wild.
it's a proxy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's this middleware. It's this entire middleware layer.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself,
No middleware.
you know, no middleware. I hate it.
Okay.
I hate additional software. I hate adding
Sure.
infrastructure where I don't need it. So I thought to myself, what if we could just do all the transformations in the browser? And what if there was no complex like infrastructure cost? So the idea was, well, with driver software, especially if you're doing the browser, there's a small probability that you're going to end up with all of the drivers for all of the various services that you happen to be integrating with in the browser, and which means the client that you actually deliver to the customer is this huge JavaScript bundle, right? It's massive.
Hmm.
Um, Angular has tree shakeable services, so we were actually able to, when we do driver builds, we can actually tree shake out all of the code that you don't use in your bundle. So you actually don't get, like, if for example, I'll give a simple
So tree shake
example.
is that are we just talking about compiling down the JavaScript bundle
Yeah,
so that you're just getting what what you need, what you're actually going to use?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you use a very very thin amount of code. You don't actually get this whole big bundle of various platform specific transformation code. You just get the transformations that you use. And on top of that, Angular has lazy loading, and almost all frameworks have this. So you can not only tree shake, you can also lazy load. So your actual app that you provide to your customer is very, very thin, and all of it happens in browser. So your infrastructure cost is lower, and then you don't have to worry about this caching middleware thing in your infrastructure that could break.
Mm-hmm.
You get all of this. And then on top of that, the idea is we wanted to really lower the barrier to entry into Magento
Gotcha.
because the kind of the
Setting up
driving
the
factor behind
middleware
Daffodil.
is like I remember reading the Upward, like either the spec or some of the code or the concept of it, and I was a little lost, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm a good example of somebody that is not the like smartest developer in the universe, right? Which you probably want to design, like you're saying, you want to design for somebody that isn't Linus Torvalds, like that can
Yeah,
like make sense of your project and stuff like that.
Right. So the idea was, what if we can lower the barrier to entry? And the kind of the driving goal behind that lowering was that, some of our clients, they want to do cool things, but they have limited budgets. And if you have to have a Magento expert do everything from front end to back end, that's going to be really expensive. Like, honestly, I'm just going to be frank, that's like expensive. So we thought, what if we could lower that barrier to entry so that for someone who's maybe more junior, someone who can do front end but not necessarily know the entirety of Magento, they can just work on front end and have literally no knowledge about Magento at all.
Yeah.
That's what we were shooting for.
Yeah. Well, that's the dream. That's the PWA dream.
Yeah. So on top of that, so one of the cool things is so Vue Storefront, for example, supports multiple platforms, right? You don't just have to use Magento. You can use
Yeah.
Shopware, or you can use PIM
Yeah.
Core, or a variety of different softwares. Whereas I believe PWA Studio only currently integrates with Magento
I think
at the
so.
moment, as far as
So you probably don't work with PWA Studio much.
I actually have a pretty open line of communication with James Zetlin.
Oh, cool. Nice.
We chat
Nice.
pretty
Yeah,
frequently, and if you don't know James, he's the
Yeah, no, yeah, I know.
behind
Yeah,
PWA
I
Studio.
know James. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know who you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Yeah, we've had him on the
But yeah,
podcast, and then actually it was interesting. He just tweeted yesterday in response to something that we had said on a recent podcast that Willem de Groot had talked about how content security policy is sort of dead in the sense that like he's always scanning sites for his security scanning, and he found that some wildly small percentage of people had their content security policy configured the right way. So they had an interesting conversation about it, and James posted yesterday. You're not on Twitter. That's the thing. I noticed that because I found you.
Don't use it.
Yeah, I found you on there. You do have an account, but you don't really use it. You got to get on Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter's fun. There's a cool Magento community there.
Do you know Daniel Sloof?
Yes.
Yeah. So he gripes at me all the time about how I don't use social media.
Yeah.
All the time.
Well, you're on LinkedIn. I mean, you're getting in on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Yeah, Daniel Slope is awesome. Like he'll post literally like every few months, but he'll just drop something impressive like every time. Like I remember he's like, oh, here's an open source version of checkout for Magento 2 or something like that, and he'll just drop like nuggets,
Yeah.
But anyway, I completely lot. But anyway, so there was an interesting conversation around content security policy. But yeah, so you're saying you have a good line of communication with James.
Yeah. So I don't use PWA Studio a lot. I hardly look at it, to be perfectly honest. But when we come across a weak point of Magento GraphQL APIs, or we come across something that we're like, I think to myself, I wonder if PWA Studio solved this, I typically will reach out to James and say, what did you guys do? And on a fair number of occasions, he didn't know it was a problem until I brought it up, and then they know it's a problem now.
Yeah, that's good.
So a simple example was there's no GraphQL API for refreshing a customer's token. So once you're logged in, you have 24 hours to do whatever you're going to do. And if you happen to come back the next day, you're
logged out.
Immediately logged out.
Wow.
After a certain amount of time. So for example, if you come with like 1 minute remaining on your token, there's no refreshing.
Right.
You're just logged out.
That's wild. Yeah, I recently had to build a token refresh for my Google Auth, in my Laravel app, and I was like, is this thing gonna work? And it was pretty straightforward. But yeah, I mean, you got to have that, like.
Right. So it's a weak point of Magento 2, and he hadn't realized it, and we came across it because we're like, we want to do authentication. We'd like customers to log in, please. We want their account information, and we want them to have a nice user experience.
We want them to stay logged in. Yeah. That's cool.
So,
That's cool.
Little things.
Yeah. So I think I have a little bit of a picture of sort of, like why Angular. I was curious on Daffodil. Is it do you got sites in production? Like what kind of scale?
Yeah. So at the moment, we really have one client who's using it as a beta. It's currently their beta site. So they have customers, and a small number of customers utilizing it, and we're building it out from there. But they've been a fantastic client for us, because first of all, it's like it's a long-standing client of ours, so they have a lot of faith in us, and they've been really open to the whole process. So, they're from time to time when we're working at Daffodil, we'll realize, man, we did something terribly, horribly wrong. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And they've been super understanding. And
If you're a software developer
they,
and you don't occasionally do something terribly, horribly wrong, you're lying to yourself.
yeah. So they've been really, really open to helping us. Like, they're like, oh yeah, that's a problem. You guys fix it, get through it, and come back to our project, and we'll continue along.
Nice.
So that's been a really nice process. But yeah, it's really only one site that's kind of in beta at the moment. Really, our focus at this point is getting up to guest checkout. So we have guest checkout pretty much well understood at this point. So the whole so we have product type support. So all the different Magento product types, bundled, configurable, grouped, and simple. We have, obviously category support. We actually have some little features which are limited in Magento, but Daffodil exposes an API which if you wanted to supplement them, you could. So for example, like menus. Right now, there's no concept of a menuing system in Magento, but we do provide like one menu, which is like the category tree. But if you had a completely separate system with a completely different menuing system, you could go retrieve whatever menu in whatever format and plug it in, and it would work.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the name? What's the source of the name, by the way, Daffodil?
That's a good question. So the long and short of Daffodil's existence for my own personal interest is that my mother shops online a lot, and she complains constantly. So I thought, what if I could make online shopping easier in any fashion? And she really likes daffodils, so I picked a flower.
That's beautiful, man. That's beautiful.
Daffodil.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I love that. It's interesting. I was talking to somebody about a product name, and it was like named after like their grandmother, who had passed away, and they had a really great relationship with and stuff. So that's really cool. And so it's open source? Is it a do you have a commercial version of it? Is it pure open source?
Pure open
for the
source.
love of the game.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're here. Well, the whole idea is that we're trying to make e-commerce better, and we're trying to make it easier to use. I don't quite care about the money. I've actually had a number of conversations with interested clients who almost uniformly say, "What do you get out of it?"
Right.
It's open source. It's free. What do you get out of it? And I say, honestly, nothing at the moment. Maybe one day, but right now we're just trying to make e-commerce better. Because honestly, from a front end perspective, not just from a customer side, but from a developer side, it's awful. It's so painful. Yeah. Like Magento 1, if I have to look at another layout XML file for the rest of my life,
I don't want
to touch
somebody.
it. I don't want to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's
heebie-jeebies.
It's pretty rough. I'm a bit of a Vue fanboy, and I use it. Vue is kind of big in the Laravel ecosystem, which is what my app is written in. I like it. It's simple. I haven't really messed with Vue Storefront at all, but I love the team over there. Philip and the rest of them are always doing cool stuff, and I'm sure you could have a real deep technical conversation on, Vue versus Angular and things like that, which we don't need to get into, but I'm a little bit of a Vue fanboy.
Oh yeah, Evan did a really, really, really great job. Evan,
yeah,
fantastic framework, absolutely wonderful framework.
Yeah,
very good.
Yeah.
I actually had he did a presentation at Laracon in 2017 or 2018.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Laracon one year in Louisville.
Nice.
And he did a presentation there along with Adam Watham,
nice,
Taylor Otwell, and a number of other characters in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he did a really good job. He first of all, the code itself is great.
Yeah.
But the fact that he single-handedly maintains it, it's not only him, but a large
pretty
chunk
much,
of it is him.
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome. That guy's a hoss.
Yeah. Wait, a hoss? What's a hoss? Is that like a gaming term?
I guess I don't know. Honestly, I've used that term for 15, 20 years. I just have no idea where it came from. I think it's
Is it
HAAS.
like a
I
is it
think
like a
it's
boss? Is it just like they're just
yeah, it's a similar word. It's used
it's
similarly.
like
I don't actually know its definition.
okay. I'm learning new things. I've learned Haas and tree shaking. It's the first time I'd ever heard the term tree
Yeah,
shaking.
tree
Um,
shaking. Get all the nuts and trees and branches and things you don't need out of there.
right.
We don't want them.
Um, cool, man. So, I don't know. Was there anything else as far as PWA goes that you wanted to talk about, get off your chest, rant about? Um,
Uh, not specifically. I did see there's a former core dev. His name is Yev. I can't pronounce his
Core
name.
Magento Dev.
Um, yeah, he's no longer there. He actually started doing like a software as a service style Magento called Magneto,
Okay.
or he works on it. He's a co-founder of it. I can't remember his name at
I
the
think I
moment.
know who you're talking
Um,
about. Yeah.
but he
Yev Henny or
flames
something.
Magento constantly.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I can't remember his name,
I'll
unfortunately.
find him.
But he did bring up a really good point the other day about how people don't, even though you're doing a PWA, you can still make a bad PWA, right? You can write bad code. I can write a piece of JavaScript code that goes into an infinite loop and consumes all the CPU in your browser. I can do that. Um, so having a PWA doesn't necessarily make your application fast, but having developers who know what they're doing making the PWA gives you an opportunity for a better experience, right?
Yeah.
You're not guaranteed a better experience, but you have the opportunity to
I think it's
have such an experience.
Yehor Shidakov.
Yes,
Shidakov. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe that's
Yeah.
correct. But he brought up a comment on
Technical lead
perceived
at
performance.
Technical lead at Magneto. That's a cool logo. Yeah.
Yeah. He brought up a concept called perceived performance that I saw, and it's just about I mean, if you don't know what perceived performance is, it's the idea that when you load a screen, it looks, even though it might not be fully loaded, it looks like it's loading. You get an idea that something's
Yep.
happening. So if you're familiar with the concept of like ghost states, or they're called,
Is that where
I
like
don't know
the
another term for
layout?
them.
They're like the layout is sort of stubbed
Yeah,
out.
little like gray
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
bars,
Yeah.
and it looks kind of,
It feels faster that way.
yeah, it feels faster. Most PWAs don't do that. Now, we
That's surprising.
don't have that built into Daffodil, because Daffodil is this hybrid layer between the way it looks and how it works. It's this middle layer.
So
But if you wanted to
the
do that,
front end layer? You're saying you said that it's a layer between how it looks. So what's on the front of Daffodil as far as the
yeah.
presentation
So
layer?
we have what we call the Daffodil design library. It's simply an npm package, which is a set of components. It's a component kit that we have designed a certain way that we use on a bunch of various
Oh,
sites.
but that's
But you don't have to
you-
use the component kit. You can use your own. So,
okay.
for example, for this particular client that we're working with, we entirely wrote their own component kit, and it's awesome.
Nice.
And it's super. I mean, I can't put in enough words how awesome I think that component kit is.
Nice.
But yeah, we don't dictate what your front end looks like, and we don't want to. We want you to, it's your business, it's your brand. You write it.
Yeah.
Like you make it look the way and do what you want it to do.
Yeah.
We can provide some utilities and material. Actually, so Angular has if you don't know, Angular has
Material design framework.
Material design is,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's a material library for Angular, and they have something called the CDK, which is the component development kit, and it makes building component kits much easier. But you can utilize things from Daffodil, you can utilize things from Material, you can utilize things from the CDK to make your UI look like whatever you want it to be. But to get to your original point, things that I want to gripe about with PWA, I think that people will unfortunately say that PWA is a kind of silver bullet, and it's not. It's an opportunity. You have to take advantage of the opportunity and do it right. You can't just write code and it'll just work. It just doesn't work for anything.
All right, I completely lost my train of thought.
We can talk about Ninja more if you'd like.
Yeah. Oh, do you want to talk about that, dude? I think that's insane. Like,
Sure.
So Ninja is like the probably the most popular gamer in the world, I'd imagine. Again, I'm not a huge gamer guy, but I know about him vaguely. And you were saying that you used to play with him back in the day?
Yeah, so my hobby, my side passion is video games, and it's put me into some interesting kind of situations where I meet people that I otherwise wouldn't meet. So Tyler is one of them. So way back in the day when I was in high school, I played Halo like constantly. I would get home from sports practice, and I would play Halo, and I would play from like 6 p.m. until 1 a.m. every single day. And I got pretty good and I got pretty competitive, so I started going to tournaments and things. And kind of if you once you get to a certain level, you start playing with the same people over and over and over again. And I got good enough that I was playing with a bunch of people in the scene, one of which was Tyler or Ninja. And yeah, I've had various. I haven't actually had deep conversations with him, but I have had over the years various conversations with him over game chat way back in the day
Super cool.
in Halo 3.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy how big gaming has gotten, and it's like this huge business. And
Hmm.
it's also a lot when you think about COVID and things like that. You think about businesses that are kind of COVID friendly, right? Like a lot of e-commerce,
Hmm.
is, and of course, gaming is much more sort of COVID friendly, right? Than like real sports. And I think that, what's it called? The professional gaming where they watch uh, professional games and stuff like that, professional gamers. What's the
Yeah.
word?
Like esports.
Esports. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Esports, I had no idea is this massive industry and massively growing, rapidly growing industry. Um,
Yeah, to that point, I will shout out Icebound Esports is the team that I'm currently associated with. I actually play for a professional esports team.
really,
Yeah, Icebound Esports is a Starcraft team that I play
dude,
for.
that's amazing. So,
Yeah.
so do you get paid? Like,
I don't.
okay,
I don't at the moment. There are players on the team who do get paid. I'm not like near that level.
yeah,
I'm like one notch down, so I don't get paid.
dude. So how many hours a day do the guys that are at the top of the game like that? How many hours a day are they playing?
I can speak for specifically StarCraft. Like Halo is a little bit different, but I'll talk about StarCraft a little
Right.
bit. So StarCraft, uh, the best player in the world right now, or kind of considered to be the best player in the world, is a Finnish player. His name is Cyril. Cyril, I believe, is reported as saying he plays 4 hours a day, but he watches
A
StarCraft
lot.
8 hours a day.
Okay.
So he's StarCraft focused almost his entire day, and he is incredible to say the least. He is an incredible StarCraft player. Comparatively, if you kind of compare StarCraft to chess, he's the equivalent of Magnus Carlsen almost.
Wow. Who's the best chess
Just
player in the world?
yeah, equivalent
That's insane, dude.
almost. He's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
And then did you also want to mention the thing about Toby that you had mentioned?
Yeah, so if people who don't know StarCraft or don't know Shopify, so Toby Lutke is the CEO of Shopify, and he provides an inordinate amount of funding to the StarCraft community. He actually funds several major tournaments. He actually has hired uh, StarCraft players because they're good at StarCraft.
That's so
So there
cool.
was there was a StarCraft player's name was Select, who was looking for a job after graduating with a CS degree, and Toby reached out. Was like, "Hey, come work at Shopify.
That's
I know
awesome.
you're a really good StarCraft player."
That's so cool.
So yeah.
It's interesting. I'm so like fascinated by Toby and impressed by him on so many levels. And it's like coming from the Magento community, there's this like natural sort of animosity with the Shopify world, at least for me. And it took me some time to kind of get over that. And I'm really kind of interested in learning more about the Shopify world and things like that. And it's like there's something there's something uniquely powerful about a founder-led company, just period.
Hmm.
Like, and hopefully everything, goes well with Magento under Adobe and things like that. But there's just something irreplaceable about having the founder lead the company. and stick around to keep the original vision. And he's just such a cool guy. Like when I heard you say that, I was like, not even surprised. Like he's just like that. Just
Hmm.
seems like the and I didn't know he was really into games or whatever, Starcraft, but that just seems like the kind of cool thing he would do just because he's like just a cool guy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like he seems like a real like hacker at heart, like just a real, like obviously he has a ton of business expertise and is the CEO, but like I've heard him on a couple podcasts recently, and he's just like, yeah, he's just like real down to earth kind of a guy.
Hmm.
Um, you got something it look like you're trouble.
I just had to. Those cameras being silly, so I had to tap on it.
it's
Just gotta tap on it
it's
sometimes.
always something. It's always something with
Yeah.
the damned equipment.
Welcome to software. Nothing ever
Nothing.
works, and you better hope it does sometimes.
Yeah. So on the let's see here. We have the remote work stuff and then the agency side versus merchant side stuff. Why don't we talk about remote work, because this is something I've been
Sure.
wanting to get into. How long have you been working remotely yourself?
2016, end of 2016.
Dude,
Yeah, so
I thought you were gonna
four
say
years.
20 years, and I was like, whoa.
No, no, I've been remote working since I was 5. Today's actually my birthday. I'm 28.
Really? Holy
Yeah,
crap,
yeah,
dude! Happy birthday!
yeah. Thank
That's
you.
awesome, man.
So completely unexpected, but
Yeah.
well, not the birthday's not unexpected. The podcast is unexpected. Um, but yeah,
That's cool,
so
man.
yeah, 4 years ish
Okay.
now, just about.
Yeah. Some of the people I know that have been doing it the longest are maybe like 15, 16, 17 years, like the real veterans. I think I've been doing it
Hmm.
for like 8, something like that. Anyways, so I have this whole list of questions, but I hate just reading off of questions. I mean, basically what I want to get into with it is like what do you love about remote work? What do you not love about it? Like obviously everybody is sort of working remote now to some extent. It's kind of gone mainstream like overnight, you
Hmm.
know? Um yeah, so like
So yeah, what do I love? Uh, I love the freedom to wear my pajamas all day. I mean, nobody talks about that, but the fact that like I get to wear whatever I want, I don't have to like wear collared shirt, whatever. I can just hop on a meeting and I can have like a shirt on and I can have pajamas underneath. Nobody
yeah.
knows. Uh, so I like that. I like the comfort life.
Dude, so the funny thing
Uh,
is I was 100% like team pajama t-shirt forever. Obviously I'm wearing a collared shirt now, which is which
mhm.
is which is a little awkward. But the funny thing is, dude, I found these shirts and they are so comfortable, and I was like, I think I'm gonna step up from to wear more of these polo shirts, and they're super comfy. So now I'm always wearing a polo shirt like some kind of a business, douche.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I agree with you completely on that. It's
Yeah.
it's
So I like that. It's a pleasant thing. It's like a little thing. It's not like, oh, my day is only about wearing pajamas.
it's just cool to
But
be
it's a comfort thing.
comfortable. It's just cool to be able to work and to focus on the work, and
Hmm.
to not have to focus on all the kind of theater of work of like, what do you
Hmm.
wear, and are you sitting at your desk, and are you paying attention at meetings, and all the stuff that
Yeah.
isn't actually getting work done, and you can just kind of focus
Hmm.
on the work.
Yeah. So I'll talk about that a little bit and kind of how I think that affects culture. So I don't know if I've mentioned this. I own an agency, or like I'm the founder of my
Yeah, I
company.
wanted to I wanted to
Um,
have you explain that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so my company is called Greycore. I'm the founder, I'm the sole owner. It's actually only 5 of us. It's a pretty small team, and all of us are developers, or all of us are technical. So there's no project managers, there's no support staff. It's just us.
I love that.
Um,
I love that
yeah,
model.
so
Yeah.
it's fantastic. We play video games together on Twitch on Thursdays at 6 o'clock.
I was talking
So
to I don't know if you know Riccardo Tempesta. He has an agency out in Italy. He was like a Magento
I
master. Really cool guy. I was
yeah.
talking to him last week. Same deal. They also playing video games together, as a team.
Hmm.
I think that's super cool.
Yeah, it's a nice little thing to do. Um, But one of the things that I noticed the most is like there's no concept of first. I don't know if this is because we're all developers, but there's no office politics. It doesn't exist.
Right.
There's no who's better than who. Jimmy and Susie are fighting over in the corner. It's not a thing. And I don't know if that's a side effect of remote work or the fact that we're all technical, but I think
Probably a
because
combination.
yeah, I think because we all are working towards the same goal. Like we all work on Daffodil pretty much all day, every day. Um, there's a very strong camaraderie where like if someone doesn't understand something, they'll help the other person out. If someone needs help with something, they'll help the other person out. And there's no concept of like, oh, it's six o'clock. So I'm located in Ohio. One of my team members is in New York. Another team member is in Texas, and that's the farthest kind of they are apart. But there
What part of
was a period
Texas
of
are they
time
in?
where currently in Austin.
Nice. Yeah, I'm about a half hour
Yeah,
north of Austin.
yeah. They just moved up from Denton, actually.
Okay.
So right outside Dallas. Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
And that's another, we can talk about that one too with remote work. The fact that you can live with that wherever, that's really huge. And I think for long-term societal things, I think that's going to be a really big driving force because you can work in a low cost
hmm
area and have a job that is really kind of irrelevant to the cost of your
hmm
area.
hmm Yeah, it's going to
That's a
be
big one.
fascinating to see how, and this has been the case now for probably a good 5 to 10 years, maybe 5 years. It's really been the case within like for developers, I would say. But it's going mainstream to another degree, right? Where I
Hmm.
think it's going to sort of change the shape of a lot of these, like call it like tier two or tier three cities. Um, I had this thought the other day, like tier one cities are going to become tier 1.25 cities, and tier two cities are going to become tier 1.75. Like it's really going to
Yeah.
kind of flatten out in some ways, I think. Um,
Yeah, I think cities like New York, like New York City, will continue to exist, but I think the really mid-tier cities will maybe dissipate a little. They'll get a little bit smaller. Their population will drop off. That's my
hmm
opinion.
hmm And then when you think about, is it called Starlink, the satellite internet deal that Elon Musk is doing, that because internet is really pretty rough in rural areas. I mean, when you talk, like I'm in a
Hmm.
suburban area, but when you talk about even further into like more rural areas, and there's all sorts of like techie people that have like have their own little farm or their own little ranch. Like I thought about
Hmm.
doing that as well. And it's funny how internet is kind of one of the big things that's a snag. So when that changes, like it's gonna be real interesting, to see how that affects cities and stuff
Yeah,
like
I'm
that.
all for the ranch in the middle of nowhere, assuming I have
Yeah,
good internet. Like I'm fine with that.
exactly.
Like if I have like 500 acres of forest between me and the next person,
Yeah,
I'm fine.
right,
Let's go.
right. And that's like almost the deciding factor. Like kind of half joking, but kind of not half joking. Like the internet is like, you also want to be close to things. Like I started looking into it, and it's like, well, shit, like if I have to drive 20 minutes to get to the grocery store, like that's one thing. If I have to drive 40 minutes to get to the grocery store, all of a sudden I'm like, ugh, that's kind of
Yeah.
a drive.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's obviously infrastructure things as well, but um,
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about kind of remote work and how it kind of exists at Greycore. So the three kind of main benefits to working at Greycore, because we are a startup. Remote work, obviously, we offer unlimited PTO, and we also offer flexible work hours. So like one of my employees is Taiwanese American and goes to Taiwan once a year for 2.5 months.
mm,
So when she's in Taiwan, she works from 10 p.m. our time to 10 a.m. our time, and that can be a little bit of a challenge. But because we have flexible work hours, she's a very, like, in terms of what she does, she's very, very good at her job, um, and it affords her the ability to do really what she wants to do. And from my perspective as a business owner, I get really high quality work, and there's this kind of trade-off of, yeah, I don't really feel the need to have control over what she does in her day to day in terms of like you must work from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So there's this trade-off of trust, And I think that just from a, kind of an owner employee perspective, or kind of manager employee perspective, it's a really, really good thing. Like, I don't
Trust
ever feel
is
like any of my employees.
trust is absolutely everything. Like people talk about, well, time zone, I want them in the right time zone, or I want them to be the right seniority level, or I want them to communicate it. It's all trust. It all comes back to trust. If the trust is there, they could be anywhere because you know that
Hmm.
if they were in a place where they were unable to get work done, they'd tell you about it. They'd be honest about it,
Hmm.
right? So it's like, and how do you build trust for companies that aren't used to this and don't get it, and it doesn't make sense to them intuitively? I think that's a tricky problem to solve, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I'm very surprised at, that Google has taken all of their employees and said, you guys can work remotely for the foreseeable
hmm
future.
That's
That's
a
a leap of faith.
huge deal. Yeah. Because remember was it Yahoo that did the exact opposite a few years back? I believe it
They brought
was,
everybody in.
yeah, I believe it was Marissa Mayer from Google who became the CEO of Yahoo, and I'm pretty sure it was there. They had some flexible policy on remote work, and they were like, everybody back into the office. You know,
That's such a
such a
mistake.
mistake.
Not only like that's so much overhead. There's so much overhead associated with having an office. I mean, we're all remote. We're all in different states.
Yeah,
I don't have an
yeah,
office. Like, my office is my
yeah,
house. Eventually, we may have a small office, but I don't plan
yeah,
on it. Like, having like everybody come in and be
yeah.
here.
Do you
It's
guys
so it's so
do
inefficient.
things to get together on some kind of a yearly thing, anything like that to try to get together in person at all?
So the first thing we kind of all did, and back then there was only three of us. There are now five. We went to meet Magento, New York City.
Oh,
So
nice.
we came out and we happened to present a thing at the hackathon. And that wasn't really the intent wasn't to go to the hackathon. The intent was to go to a
Just hang
conference,
out together and stuff.
and hang out together.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. No, that's a great way to
but last
get
year we
together.
we didn't do anything, unfortunately. And this year has kind of been shot for that goal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the video dropped out for a second there. Um, what does your schedule look like? Just in terms of like when you're working, how you're getting, mixing things up as far as when you're focusing, when you're working, when you're communicating with clients, when you're doing personal stuff in order to not be constantly um, overloaded with work and stuff like that. I'm big into schedules. I love learning about,
Sure.
like the little
Yeah.
details of people's schedules.
Sure. So, I am very lucky in that my wife is very regimented, extraordinarily so. So,
So you're the
it's
opposite.
almost like, yeah, I am so far the opposite,
Gotcha.
that my employees give me grief about it.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so I wake up at right about 8:50 every day.
Okay.
I get a cup of coffee and I have a small spot of breakfast, and then I really just start working. I work until noon, uh, noon to about 12:30, eat lunch, and then 12:30 to 3, it's kind of like another hard work session, and then right around 3:30 I start to like my mind kind of starts to melt.
The afternoons are
So it's
gone. Yeah.
I can't, like, staring at code after 3:30 is nigh impossible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I just can't.
Yeah.
So sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a break, or I'll get on a call with somebody, or if I don't really have anything to talk about with a bunch of people, I'll actually stop and I'll play a game of Starcraft. Um, just take some time to kind of to decompress a little, and then usually around 4:30 I'll pick it back up and kind of go until around 6:30, maybe 6:37, somewhere in
Yeah.
there. Eat dinner.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's typically the day.
That's a pretty full schedule, and especially if you're doing a lot of coding. Like it was interesting how you were talking about how, those gamers at the top of their game only play for 4 hours a day. I think I heard somebody say once, as a general rule, software developers really only have like about 4 hours of actual productive coding time in them. Um, and you're probably a bit above that average, you know?
Yeah, staring at RabbitMQ or like message queuing things all day, it's painful. Like holding an asynchronous system just in your mind,
Yeah,
it's it's ridiculous. It's so
yeah,
hard.
yeah,
So
yeah. It really is.
yeah, it's just difficult.
I have my schedule. I do some coding in the mornings. Really for well, I do some Twitter, and I'm starting to really kind of carve out that Twitter time so that it's not just like randomly doing it throughout the day, but it's kind of focused. I kind of have a system to it, and I respond to
Hmm.
my mentions, DMs, and then I go in and I'm really like learning stuff in the feed. It's not just like nonsense or whatever. Anyways, and then I'll do some coding. Really probably only like more like 2 hours. Um, yeah. And then anyways, yeah, and then I find that in the afternoons, I really like having a conversation. Like I've been starting to do that more often, whether it's a podcast or just a conversation. And
Hmm.
yeah, I find that in the afternoons, it's a good time for that, you know?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, kind of get into a different mode. Um,
Yeah, like I can still think about code, but in terms of like putting hands to keyboard, I'm gonna make a lot of mistakes. So why
yeah,
bother? I'd rather just talk it out and have a conversation with one of my engineers and say, hey, this is what we need to talk about. Like this is a problem that you've been facing. I can help you out and we can solve it and we can pair on it together and get it
yeah.
solved.
Do you do a lot of pair, a lot of
Oh,
pairing?
all the
Okay.
time. All the time. I'd pair at least 2 or 3 hours a day.
Nice. That's really
At
cool.
least.
I was always
Yeah.
fascinated by, is it extreme programming, the name of the
Yeah, that's where it comes from.
methodology where
Yeah.
you basically do everything, all your work as a pair? And I don't know how many people do that in practice, but maybe you're pairing. I mean, that's interesting that you do that much together. Um,
Yeah, test writing is typically kind of when it comes out. So let's say like a lot of the times, um,
and you're big into
there's
TDD,
probably
right?
only, yeah,
Okay,
huge,
okay,
huge.
yeah.
Now my employees will say that I suck at it, but that's a different problem. Um, a lot of the times I will kind of like just kind of spitball out code of an idea, and then I'll say, all right, I really don't have time to focus on this thing. Like there's something else that's pressing, so I'll hand it off to
Yeah,
somebody, and they'll take it from
yeah.
there. But my personal strength is just the ability to take a problem, deconstruct it, and then especially when we get into the nitty-gritty details, like iron out, okay, this, and deconstruct it into something that's approachable, and then functionally take it into something that can be coded. That's really where my strength
Hmm.
lies. So uh, I don't want to go into too technical detail, but if you've ever heard the concepts of contravariance and covariance,
No.
um, those are terms in language design that apply to specific scenarios when you're considering extensibility around a particular piece of
Okay.
code. And I happened upon a couple of problems that are related to it in Daffodil core code, and this is what ended up being one of our major mistakes. We had to basically reinvent the wheel around it, um, and we wouldn't have caught it. So I happened to be looking at a particular subsystem, and we wouldn't have caught it unless I got in there and really thought hard about it. But then once I had deconstructed it, I said, okay, well, this is the problem. This is the scope of the problem. This is like we actually when we find problems, we basically write up formal mathematical proofs. So this is kind of interesting.
That's
Um,
intense.
so yeah. So I'm a math major,
I
so
was a
like this is
math
kind of what I
major.
innate. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, good,
you wouldn't know that
good.
because I've forgotten all of it, but I was like pretty heavy into math, abstract algebra
Uh,
and the whole 9 yards. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So my specialty was encryption.
Okay.
But we write basically formal mathematical proofs about like the system in question. So especially when we're talking about contravariance and covariance, we're talking about really technical language specific or language oriented things which dictate how a program should or should not be designed. Um, and this was a particular instance where we could basically write a literal math proof saying that, this code cannot function as a result of this behavior. So it was really about extensibility around like if you're a developer and you have like a product in Daffodil, there are limitations to like how you can add attributes your custom attributes on top of the DAF product as a result of contravariance and covariance. We had to write a whole generic system around different things in Daffodil in order to enable people to extend upon Daffodil behaviors. But yeah, technical shenanigans. I don't want to go too far
That's
deep in
wild, man.
That's literally its own TED Talk.
Yeah, that does sound like a TED Talk. I've never heard anything close to that in my life, that the idea of creating mathematical proofs related to how you're building software.
Especially when you talk about like front end code, nobody talks about it.
No.
So we're super niche.
I mean, in some ways, a unit test is a mathematical proof.
Yeah. So a lot of the times we have like this formal proofing system, and we will translate that exactly into test, like 1-to-1.
Okay. That actually makes it sound very, very normal, like in the sense that a unit test sort of is a mathematical proof. Like
yeah, it's
anyway,
proof the software does what you anticipate.
Yeah. So anyway, you gotta do a blog post on that at some point, and I'll sit there and try to wrap my head around it.
Sure.
But anyway, we're sort of at our time here. Anything as far as remote work that you wanted to mention, or really anything at all? I know we didn't touch on your first GitHub sponsor yet. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that was a lot of the GitHub sponsors I get are from people in the Magento community who like I'll hop on a call. Like if I'm in the Magento community Slack, I'll literally hop on a call with someone who has a question because I know where they are. I've been there before, and I say I can help you get through this exact situation.
That's cool, man.
So I'll hop on a call with them, and that usually leads to a sponsorship, which is really a really good feeling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really have much else to say.
Cool, man.
I mean, I can sit here and talk for years.
Yeah, no, we'll have to do another one of these soon to get into more stuff. I had a great time chatting, and so where can people find you online?
Yeah, so probably the best place if you ever want to get in touch with me is GitHub. Surprisingly enough, I basically respond to everything in GitHub almost instantly, except for pull requests for my engineers. That gets enough hate. But no, that or Slack. So I'm in a bunch of different Slack channels at Damien Web Dev if you need to do that. In terms of Twitter, there's at Greycore.io. There's at Daffodil PWA if you want to kind of be more specific to what you want to talk about. But yeah, that's
cool,
it.
Man. Well, thanks again. It was a lot of fun. And thanks everybody for tuning in. And we'll see you next week.